Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Scott Lewis. Thanks for being on the show again, Scott.
Thanks, Whitney. Glad to be here.
Now, I'm always honored to have you and your team on the show. You all definitely operate at a higher caliber, and I love having guys like you on the team or on the show. And so, a little about Scott. I would encourage you to go back and even search him on the show. We've talked about numerous topics and things they've done in their business and how they've been successful. And looking forward to today's conversation. But a little about him: he's a co-founder and chief executive officer of Spartan Investment Group LLC, also known as SIG, and has led several successful real estate developments ranging from single-family flips to raw land development. His current projects include the development of a 98,000 square foot self-storage development, infill lots, luxury condo development, and the development of row homes. Scott, thank you again. Give the listeners, why don't you give them an update on the Spartan team and maybe something you all are doing now, and then let's dive in.
Yeah, that's definitely my mistake. That's a bio from when we first spoke, and we've been at this quite a bit together. So, yeah, so Spartan definitely isn't. We're not involved in any more residential stuff. We put that ugly baby to bed for us, and now we've got over 4,000 storage units, a couple hundred RV pads, and we're really just 100% focused on storage. So it's been a really good ride. That bio is probably about 18 months old. So that's really cool to hear that and to kind of see where we were when you and I first spoke compared to where we are now. So
awesome. Yeah, I knew you all have been doing some big stuff, but 4,000 self-storage units now.
Well, it's so multifamily, like this, that you guys speak indoors, right? So it's not the average facility that we buy is 500 units, and we're building, we just bought one that's 1,106 units. There's not a ton of multifamily deals out there that are 1,100 units, right? I mean, there's some stuff in LA and New York and stuff, but those are 10-figure price tags on that kind of stuff. So right. For us, it's a little bit duplicitous, but we do have, our metric is square feet. That's what like the guys like, if you want to measure kind of your success yardstick in a vanity metric, where doors is in the multifamily, square feet is in the storage. So we're probably approaching 500,000 square feet, which isn't bad. Probably by the end of the year, we'll be a top 50 operator in the country by the end of the year. We've got some good acquisitions in the pipeline right now, but things are rocking and rolling. The team is, our headquarters team it'll be 12 here pretty soon with a couple of hires coming on, and we got another 15 folks at the property level. So we're moving and shaking.
Nice. No, it's awesome to see your all's growth and just watch it happen. One thing I have in common with Scott is just the military background, and it doesn't take long to talking to Scott that you'll know that he has a military background. I love the structure and the discipline, and I feel like that's one thing that's helped me, me be more successful. It's just the mindset that the military helps you to have as well. I call it my never give up mindset that they really instill into you, and I love that about Scott as well. So, but Scott, one thing I know we're going to discuss today is just how that military planning and how that's helped you to navigate difficult times, and I know people that may not have a military background may not be really aware of what that could entail, but I'd love for us to dive into that and how that's helped you, maybe even from forming your all's business and how it helped you back then to be prepared for difficult times like this, to even some deal specific things.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I must have like Army guy written on my forehead. I was standing in line, just minding my own business in the TSA pre-check. Like I was in civilian clothes. I was traveling to a deal. I was standing there like probably screwing off on my phone or something like that. And suddenly, like the woman in front of me just turns around and says, "Thank you for your service." And I was like, what? She goes, "Yeah, you look like you're in the military." I'm like, I'm standing there minding my own business, like text messaging on my phone, but apparently it's invisible ink that nobody else can see, like everybody else can see but me. But yeah, so
standing there in your flip-flops and your Hawaiian shirt, right?
That's exactly right. Like, and it's just like, I guess I just wear it on my sleeve. But no, the military, when I joined the military, I was a little bit older. I was 27. I had a civilian job. I was a regional sales manager for a biotech firm. And I was making some strategic decisions in my life. And one of the things is I was looking at MBA programs, and I was also looking at the military. The military was always something that I wanted to do. My dad served in Vietnam. And the reason I wanted it was for leadership. That's really it, outside of serving our country, right? There was some specific reasons why I wanted to go on to active duty outside of just wearing the flag. And leadership and planning was one of them. I didn't exactly know where I wanted to go at that time because I was 27, but I did know that I wanted to be in a leadership role. I had actually no plans to start a company then. I'm not an entrepreneur by kind of design. I kind of fell into it as just being unemployable by anybody else. So I had to start something that I could earn a paycheck with. But I looked at the MBA programs, and then I looked at the military, and I'm just like, I really think that the leadership would be much more well-trained in the military than it would be in an MBA program, in an academic program. So I signed up, and I signed up as an infantry officer, knowing that those guys, we got the best training. We had access to all the schools. We could do basically anything we wanted within the military framework because the infantry being the tip of the spear, we got a lot of resources. So I did that, and I really learned a ton. I really paid attention with the end goal of, I wasn't doing a career. I was going in, I was doing my 4 years of active duty, and I was coming out back into the civilian sector, and I'm still in the reserve. So I'm still doing my 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year thing. But it was really to go in and get that level of planning that it takes to successfully operate in an environment in which it's very complex, very dynamic. There's an enemy that always gets a vote, and he never votes with you. So it's been a really, really big help.
The enemy always gets a vote, and they never vote with you. I love that.
Yeah, they're never on your side. And that's why we look at the coronavirus that's going on right now, and that's our enemy. And, unlike 08, 09, I've heard for the last, 10 years, I've heard people reference, if you haven't done 08, 09, like you really don't know what it's like to be investing. And I've said this on multiple platforms that I think that's just phooey, because 08, 09 is nothing like it is today. There wasn't a biological pathogen out there wreaking havoc on our economy. It was there was human factors involved in 08 and 09, and it was due to human factors. This is not. This is uncontrollable. It's a very complex, dynamic environment in which the enemy gets a vote, and it's going to vote against you.
Wow. Okay. So I just love that mindset too, and just thinking that way of just the strategicness, but also, you even went into the infantry officer school. I mean, you decided that to have the best resources. You didn't do that by chance. And so, lead us into, how that helped you to maybe, way back starting Spartan, and how that helped you all to be prepared for, say, difficult times like we're facing now.
Yeah. And for folks as a reference, it's Field Manual 6-0, Chapter 9 is really where the military decision-making planning process is. And it's written so Neanderthalic infantrymen like me that drag our knuckles on the ground can read it. So if you get away from the Army speak, it's still a good reference for civilians to be able to read it, because it's not rocket science. It's really not. We wouldn't be able to do that. We'd all be dead. So it was, like going in, it was something that I was really focused on, because I knew that going in and planning for the types of operations I would have to plan, you'd have to think through multiple contingencies. So that was really kind of even when we were starting Spartan and we wrote our first strategic plan, there was some military and a lot of civilian in that regards to the higher level strategy, but really understanding the levels of operations that an organization will go through at the strategic level, the operational level, and the tactical level. Understanding those mindsets and the words and the ideology at all three levels really kind of helped us write our first strategic plan, when it was just basically me and Ryan. And that was it. We wrote that strategic plan before we really even got started, because we wanted a roadmap and understanding hey, we're at the strategic level. This is kind of the what we're going to do. and just drafting that plan at that what level and not mixing it up with what and how and all that to make it overcomplicated and to keep it really simple so that anybody could follow it. And that's really how we got our first investors. They found some investors that had turned us down literally the week before on a deal that was deep into double-digit returns on a condo development in DC. They read that plan. We had written it such that it could be easily followed because it was me and Ryan. We're not the sharpest tools in the shed by any means. So we had to write it to where we could follow it. They read it. They're like, hey guys, we're going with you. Here's all the money that you asked for. And it was just like, it was a quick, like on dime reversal. And that's really kind of what set us up for success on that first deal.
Nice. Maybe you could elaborate on what that strategic plan looked like a little bit, or help us, how do we start to write something like that for our own business?
Well, the first thing that you do is you go to www.spartan-investors.com and you download mine and you rip it off and you steal everything that I've written in there, because strategy without operations to connect to tactics is useless. Like if we give out our strategic plan to anybody that wants it, because we know that if you don't have the resources, which is where the operational level comes in, to connect that strategy to tactics, your day-to-day activities, you can't execute our strategy. So it won't matter. So I encourage people to go get it, because even if you're not doing self-storage, and even if you have no interest in building a $250 million portfolio of self-storage, the structure is still there. The overall mission, vision, and values of our company are still there. So folks that are just starting out, like, don't recreate the wheel. I didn't. Like, Ryan and I went and we looked at the values of Google and Zappos and some of the like top Fortune 100 best companies to work for. And we looked at what we wanted to do. We read how to write a mission statement. We're not creating the wheel here. We borrowed from a lot of different places. So that's why I encourage your listeners to go to our website and grab that plan and then use that framework to come up with, the rough heuristic is 3 to 5 strategic goals. You get any more, you'll be too kind of scatterbrained. If you're kind of a one-man show, having 5 is probably still a little bit, but if you've got a team, then 5 is doable. We have 3 really kind of strategic goals. Those should take you a couple of years to really like finish. If you can knock out a strategic goal in a year, it's not really a strategy, it's operations. And then we have operational objectives that are anywhere from 1 year to 3 year, depending on how big they are. And then we have performance targets, which get turned into tactics at the day-to-day level. And all of that's written in there. The operational plans and the tactical plans are not in there, because if somebody has all of that stuff, they actually could go out and do what we wanted them to do. So we're willing to share, but we're not willing to overshare.
I understand. No, that's awesome though. I mean, that's still a great resource that we can just go to your website and see your all's plan. At least, I mean, it's a great guideline to help write our own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's dive on in a little bit as far as, just the military planning that's helped you all navigate even the difficult times right now.
Yeah. So it's called MDMP in the Army, the military decision-making process. And it's really a structured process to be able to make decisions in a complex and dynamic operating environment out there. And one of the first parts of it is to define that operating environment. It's funny. Ben and I were discussing with Professor Glenn Mueller. He was at the Best Ever conference. If you were able to catch his, he's been
on the show as well.
Oh, outstanding. So yeah, he was a professor. And we've been engaging with him for about a year, and we were talking. He was in our office, and we were sitting down talking about it, and we were talking about 08, 09, and I said, listen, just because you have experience with 08, 09, unless that operating environment shows back up, that experience, while yes, maybe 50% of it will be relevant, there's going to be a good portion of it that's not relevant for this new operating environment. So it's not necessarily the experience of living through it, it's the experience of understanding how to define your operating environment through operational variables. And that's really where the military planning comes in. I'm not going to get into it here, but for your listeners, if they want to research something, it's called PRMISI PT, or your operational variables. That those all stand for something. And for the sake of all your listeners, I won't go into them, but it's basically operational variables that enable you to define your operating environment. That's the first thing you have to do. A lot of times people, especially in our circles, we have a bias towards action. And sometimes that's good, but sometimes that's really bad. sometimes you have to take a knee and really kind of look around. And there was a technique called SEALs: stop, look, listen, and smell. And that was really to kind of understand kind of where you were at. Look around, make sure you understand what's going on out there before you go through and actually dig in and come up with a plan. So for the Spartan team, when the virus started kicking off, we did about a week and a half of what we called gathering intel. That's basically for the MDMP process, that's mission analysis. But for our team, we've taught MDMP inside of our team. And one of our team members worked as a DA civilian, Department of the Army civilian. So she understands the planning process. That's my wife. And then the other,
that's convenient. That's not really fair, you know?
No, it's not at all. That's why, like, people ask you, like, well, how'd you build such an awesome team? Well, I moved next to one and I married the other, like, and he married one of them too. So good luck executing our strategy. It's not very replicable. But you know, we spent the time, and folks in their respective lanes in operations or acquisitions or finance went out and, as much as they could for about 10 days, gathered articles, podcasts, everything that we could find, even kind of anecdotal like opinions from brokers and all that stuff, to bring into the planning process so that we could analyze that and really kind of come up with what are the top kind of opportunity. We did a SWOT analysis too, which is pretty standard on the civilian side of the house: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But we also analyzed kind of our operating environment to determine what are the facts, assumptions, and constraints that we're really going to operate with kind of going forward. What are we going to look at when we're developing our courses of action as to what the company can do? So after we gathered the intel, we really kind of analyzed that. And we did an entire whole day Zoom session. It was painful to do this remotely. It is much easier to do in person. And that really kind of helped us come up with, we looked at courses of action, and we had two that we looked at. We could either go on the offensive or we could go on the defensive. So when we went through and we had 5 evaluation criteria that were 5 things that were really important to us, and we scored the 2 different courses of action against those evaluation criteria, and it was a decision to put the company into a defensive posture for 45 to 90 days to basically let the market settle out there and really turn all of our resources inward to make our current assets and our current portfolio really like perform at the absolute top level and build all those systems and processes that we've been trying to build. But, as we're buying new properties, you get distracted and some of those processes aren't necessarily built. Well, we decided, like, hey, let's pull back for 45 to 90 days. We can't travel anyways. So we can't go do due diligence on these properties, and we can't go do market feasibilities and any of this other stuff. So let's really focus inward. And that whole process kind of led the team to, all right, let's focus inward. Let's put 80% of our resources in operations and really like bolster out our current operations so that when the shenanigans lift and we're able to travel again and we're able to go out and buy stuff, we've built so many more systems and processes inside that we're set to really operate at a very, high level for the size of company we are.
What I really like though that happened there is y'all didn't panic and y'all didn't guess. The first thing's like, well, okay, let's go gather as much information as possible so we can make an informed decision.
Yeah, one of the things you asked me in our kind of run up to the show here is to give an example of how this works in a deal. So let's take our West Texas RV park, which now in hindsight might have been maybe we didn't do enough planning. So we were buying an RV park that for a while was just absolutely crushing it. Now we're absolutely getting crushed. That's kind of the oil. That's oil, right? Boom and bust. But for that particular deal, so most of the time when we're going into these deals, especially ones that are going to be really kind of sticky in regards to maybe tough to finance or something like that, we saw really early on that this deal was going to be really kind of difficult to take down and close because it was a West Texas RV park. It was based on oil. It was a mess. The financials were a disaster. And it was really because of how the previous owners were running it. They were running it as just kind of a mom and pop operation. There was one of them, they were feuding, blah, 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 whatever. So one of the things that you do in planning is you come up with the most dangerous course of action and the most probable course of action for your enemies. Now, in our world, enemies can be, and I say enemies because that's the military language, but any third party that you can't control, like an appraiser could be an enemy, right? If they come in and they come in 40% under what you're paying for it and kill your deal, they're not going to be your friend. I'll put it that way. But so for ours, the most dangerous and most probable courses of action, we look at normally are brokers, sellers, and lenders. Those are our general kind of we'll call them the three amigos that we generally want to make sure that if one of those third party person does something that's negative, we have a course of action to mitigate that. So for our planning, months before we had to close, we went in, and for the lenders, the most dangerous course of action was that we were going to get a lender that would pull out 4 days before close. That was what we came 90 days before our closing. We came up with that as the most dangerous course of action. Our most probable course of action was they were going to come back and they were going to, we were projecting 65% LTV. And the most probable course of action we thought is they were going to come back at 60% LTV and make us bring more capital to the table. Well, the most dangerous course of action happened. 96 hours before we were supposed to close, they pulled out. So it was funny, we got the call on Friday. We were having a call with them on how they're going to go visit the property, and they're getting ready to underwrite it. And we're supposed to literally close the following Friday. On Monday, they call us yeah, guys, we're not going to do the deal. You're on your own. See ya.
You are kidding.
No, so I mean, a lot of folks have had this happen, right? You hear the horror stories of the money's hard and the lender backs out at the last minute. Well, one of the things that we did is that in addition to identifying the most dangerous course of action, we look at mitigating actions.
Of course.
So how do you mitigate that? Well, for us, we're all right, so if that happens, we're kind of SOL at that point. All the other lenders have told us no, so we're going to have to raise our own debt from our investors. Okay. We had, to that point, we had never raised debt from our investors. It was always equity. So what did we do? We contacted our attorney, and this is 90 days prior. So we contacted our attorney and said, hey, we want to have this kind of in our back pocket if we need it. What do we need to do in Texas to raise a private debt instrument? He's like, no problem. He's like, I got all the documents. He's like, it would take me 24 hours to put it together. I'm like, okay, cool.
Wow.
So on Monday morning, those guys pull out. I said, guys, let's do nothing for the next 6 or 7 hours. Let's not panic. Let's go back. Let's look at what we wrote. Oh yeah, we've got all this stuff, because we had completely forgotten that we had even done it. So we went back in our trackers and we looked at one of our risk mitigation tools, and we use Smartsheet to track this stuff. So we look back in our Smartsheet and we're like, oh yeah, I forgot. Oh yeah, we already talked to Will. We've already got all this stuff. So at 5 o'clock that night, I took the term sheet that the lender had, ripped their logo off, put our logo on it, and said hey, these seem like pretty good terms. We're okay with this. Let's see if our investors are interested. We asked 3 investors. All 3 of them said yes. We sent it out to our entire investor list. 96 hours. We had $1 million in the bank, all of the loan documents signed, and we closed the deal.
Wow.
And our broker was like, how are you guys not panicking right now? I would be falling apart. And I'm like, well, you didn't use the processes that we had been taught to go through this stuff. And we just dusted it off and just turned it right on. It was really very, very, very little stress whatsoever on that side of the house.
You had a plan. Wow.
We had the plan.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And that it worked so well too. That's even better, right?
So some of those same investors may have a different attitude towards us at oil at $22 a barrel, but it'll come back.
It will. So, and I just think it's incredible. So what are some other maybe techniques that you all put in place, maybe you didn't have to use, or other things that you planned for that may have been potential, things that could have hurt you, but you didn't have to put in place or actually go through with?
Yeah. So for that one, one of the most dangerous courses of action was the seller not extending the contract. And one of the ways that we mitigate that is we always ask the brokers to put us in contact directly with the sellers, and we sit down with the sellers if we can. Some sellers have no interest. So far we've only had one that absolutely had no interest in meeting with us whatsoever. But all the other ones we've sat down with, and we break bread with the sellers. Because we know, buying a real estate asset is a tough thing, no matter what you're doing. So to sit down, most people are reasonable. Sellers want to sell and buyers want to buy. So when things go sideways, it's usually a communication issue, right? So if we can sit down with the sellers, we're not going to cut the brokers out. I mean, we could care less. They're like, we want to take care of those brokers. So we're like, we have no interest in cutting them out. And the brokers that work with us know that we are also incredibly even keeled. So we're not going to fly off the handle with a seller, right? That's one of the reasons why brokers love working with us, because we're so methodical, because we buy by process. We don't buy by emotion. There's zero emotion in our stuff, nothing. So it's not like if we're sitting down with a seller and they say something that could be perceived as confrontational or whatever. It's like, okay, whatever. We're going to work through that. No problem. So really having the relationship with those sellers and sitting down and breaking bread with them and drinking some beers with them, that we actually still talk to those guys even today. And that was 2 years ago we bought this from them. They're just a really good group, and really kind of sitting down and opening that channel of communication enabled us to work through some tougher spots.
What are some ways that maybe the whole COVID or coronavirus issue has affected you all, that you all, prepared for through this training as well?
Yeah. So great question. So obviously we can't go out there. We're social distancing and we're sheltering in places. So in the infantry, we call it terrain, right? We're always paying attention to terrain, because it's one of the most important thing. And there's 3 classes: restricted, unrestricted, and severely restricted. So we wrote an operations plan on executing feasibility and due diligence in restricted terrain. And what we meant by that internally is severely restricted terrain it's very, very, very hard to go anywhere. In my traditional sense, I was infantry. So think of like a marsh, trying to walk through that would be severely restricted terrain. Here, shelter in place where you're not supposed to be out, that's severely restricted in terrain. So there's not much you can do in that. So we wrote a plan that basically enables us to execute our feasibility and due diligence with mitigating risk in restricted terrain, which means, hey, the virus is still floating out there, because it's going to be for a couple of years. That's my opinion, but it's going to be a couple of years before the vaccine is created and distroed and everybody's good to go. So we have to figure out how to operate amongst this thing floating around out there in a safer way. So we leveraged kind of some of that planning to build out an operations plan to do feasibility and due diligence in restricted terrain while coronavirus is still out there. So we haven't executed it because we're still in severely restricted terrain where we've got shelter in places, and we're not going to violate that to buy something. But as soon as that's lifted, we'll be out there.
Nice. Tell me, I'd love to hear a little bit about, I know how important communications are between team members, and right now I understand we're all communicating with through Zoom and through Skype and things like that, or phone, text, whatever, or different apps. But what about, let's say I'd just love to hear how the Spartan team communicates from, say, the property level up through, say, you and Ryan. Like how are those things communicated? We're about out of time, but I just, from your background, I'd just love to hear how that works. How do you and Ryan know the details of what's happening at the property level, and other people on the team as well that need to know?
Yeah, so we're not doing any special sauce. We are in the process of building both dashboards and databases so that we can have marginally real time. A lot of the bigger firms already have these systems in place. So right now we're using Smartsheet to communicate from the property level, and we have an internal property management and asset management team that then collate all of that information and then turn it into whatever Ryan and I need to see in the 3 to 5 KPIs, the key performance indicators that we're looking at for each of the particular properties. So there's nothing like I would say that Spartan isn't a thought leader or a leader in that realm yet. It's something that we've put a lot of focus on. That's a huge portion of our 90-day kind of step back into operations, is build those dashboards and those kind of portals for our teams to be able to effectively communicate through the channels even better than we are now.
All right, you're definitely a leader in just developing the strategic plan and operating plan. Love that, and I love too how you mentioned you call it take a knee, but you said stop, look, listen, smell, all those things. It's like you got to be able to do that sometimes. You got to just be able to think clear enough to just stop and take a minute, right?
Sometimes doing nothing is the right answer. It's not often the right answer, because they say, like, you know, like even a bad decision, you can adjust. But sometimes taking a tactical pause is the Army's way of saying do nothing without actually saying do nothing. They call it a tactical pause, because it's got to sound hua and like be all you can be. They couldn't say just do nothing for a minute, right? Because that would be too easy. So they say take a tactical pause, and that's basically what we did. Is we're taking a tactical pause right now to build the systems and processes in place so that we can operate even better.
Is there a recent way that you all have improved your business or operations that we hadn't talked about?
So I think we're building out Smartsheet. So we've made a decision to go with Smartsheet, and we're starting to implement portals across the entire company, leveraging Smartsheet. Historically, we were using it, but just not to the level, but we're really starting to ramp that up such that to get the most out of it, so that it creates this shared consciousness across all of our directorates. We call it the brain inside of Spartan. So that development has begun, as is our data warehousing. You know, we're collecting a lot of data from our facilities, and we're implementing Snowflake, and we've attached it to a system called Alteryx. So we're really kind of building out our data infrastructure such that we can have real-time information on all of our facilities to make better decisions in marketing, operations, all that stuff.
Nice. What's the one thing that's contributed to your success, Scott?
I think I think the self-study and really reading. I think for me, I try to read as much as I can. I know that's kind of a very, very generic kind of like one thing that's contributed to my success. But, you know, I would say that audiobooks and really leveraging that car time. You know, I was there was no iTunes. There was none of this back when I was a regional sales manager before I joined the Army. This was in, call it 2003 to 2007. So they had books on tape and books on CD, and somebody told me about them. I'm like, that's dumb. Like, why would anybody do that? Man, like those 4 years I was putting on 40,000 miles a year on my car. I missed a really big opportunity in my early 20s to be listening to that stuff. So the younger listeners, man, I know it's ubiquitous across podcasts and books on CDs and everything, or books, Audible and all this other stuff now. But man, I really looking back, those were 4 years of my life. I could have put myself even further ahead with even more reading and self-study.
Couldn't agree more. I wear it out myself, the audiobooks. Couldn't do without it. So tell us how you like to give back.
So I do a couple of things. I'm still in the Army Reserves, but then I also like to coach mountain biking for some of the local kids here in Evergreen, Colorado. Unfortunately, it's probably the camps are going to get canceled this summer, probably, I'm guessing. But normally I'm a mountain bike coach in the summer for our Parks and Rec camps. So that's really fun.
Wow. Scott, thank you again for your service. Appreciate you giving back in that way, and giving back in the mountain bike coaching too. That's really neat. But grateful for your time, and I'm hoping that it's helped the listeners. I know it's helped me, but just think through just creating that strategic plan, helping us be prepared for the worst. Or what could happen, but, having that plan. I love how you talked about you all, were developing that, talking to your attorney, 90 days before the worst thing happened, just for a plan. What do we do then if this happens? And turned out you had to use it and it worked. So I think what would have happened to the deal if you hadn't had some planning ahead of time, for that. So, but tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
So they can find me at www.spartan-investors.com, and they can find our strategic plan there. Or if they want to email me directly, it's scott@spartan-investors.com.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.